Super. Thanks, Freddie. Our chapter, like many other chapters, are devoted to our members, and they're essential to the continued success of our organization. So the goal of our coffee breaks are to provide an opportunity for our community to engage in conversations over hot cups of coffee in a short 30-minute break. Our theme for today's conversation is Green Globes. So I'm excited today to introduce our special guest, Mohammad Abbasi. He's a health building specialist at WSP. Mohammad is a building performance analyst at WSP, a leading global sustainability and engineering services company with offices worldwide. Mohammad has a bachelor's of architecture from University of Art Tehran and a master's in architecture from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago. Mohammad has been honing his expertise on health and wellness in the built ecology environment. His background is in architecture, sustainable design, and building sciences, makes him an integral member of WSP's Built Ecology Group, for which he specializes in design assistance, lead and well coordination, energy, daylight modeling, and material consultancy. So just some general guidelines before we get started. The option to click the grid view in the upper right-hand corner is to see more callers. The chat function is available at the bottom for you to put any information in that you would like to engage in the conversation. Try to be respectful of others. Allow others to join in the conversation, but be mindful of not jumping over somebody else. Feel free to jump in on the conversation though without being called upon. But if you do have something you want to add and you can't seem to get into the conversation, just use one of the reaction buttons below and I'll try to get you into the conversation. And finally, just try to keep yourself muted unless speaking, just to avoid background noise. And without further ado, Mohammad.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be joining this session. And I don't know why we weren't getting engaged with USGBC Gateway earlier. Like I live and work in Chicago. I'm pretty much involved with Illinois Green, formerly USGBC Illinois. And I hope this would be a start of like having more integration and collaboration with you guys. And I was pretty excited and inspired by the activities that you've been doing. So we're gonna dive into Green Globes. I will try to keep it short to 5-6 minutes because I'm more interested in making the conversation than like being the solo talker. And I also invited Emily from Chicago, who has a ton of experience with Green Globes. And we are collaborating on a couple of activities in Chicago, like the CLF Chicago chapter and others. So just correct me if I'm wrong. I assume that everyone in the call has some experience with LEED. Is that correct? Okay, cool. So I will try to kind of like shape my conversation more around how we are differentiating Green Globes as maybe the main competitor of LEED in the US market. Just a little bit of history there. Like, I don't know if you heard about BREEAM in England and BOMA in Canada, but like if you check like BREEAM, which is a slightly older certification than LEED, it has a similar structure. So there are so many stories at how Green Globes came to US and how it entered the market, what's their goal, who is behind that. I don't want to touch on those a lot, but there are some interesting stories behind that. But overall, Green Globes is covering almost the same areas of sustainability as LEED: energy, water, indoor environmental quality, materials. And like site, which is pretty much similar to what we have in sustainable site and LT credits in LEED. The part that is a little bit kind of like more comprehensive in Green Globes is project management. We have only one credit in LEED called IDP, Integrative Design Process. In Green Globes, that part is a little bit more comprehensive and just a longer checklist and more items that Green Globes is covering that we're going to touch on. But for the most part, is the same concept, same areas of focus, just a slightly different items that Green Globes look into that LEED doesn't. And the big difference that we're going to get into that is there's no preconditional prerequisite in Green Globes, meaning that you have 1,000 possible points, and you just need to meet the thresholds uh, for the level of certification that you're pursuing. And in my experience, like we have the lowest is 1 globe that I would say if is even like easier than LEED certified. And then we have 2 globes, 3 globes, and 4 globes. I mean, the projects I've done 3 2 globes and 1 globes. That's my experience with green globes, and been mainly driving by Chicago Sustainable Development Policy. They have a highlight at the end on that. But simply, you don't need to. The process in LEED is you have to look into the prerequisite to see if you can meet them before even starting gaining any point. I mean, green globes is different. Like from the first item that you look into, uh, you just like earn points. And the other big difference is how the process is navigated. Like one thing that I think we all like is there's no lead online, that you upload the stuff and it's slow. So as soon as you start your project and you're registered and you submit for a stage one and a stage two are pretty similar to design review and construction review in LEED. Uh, the difference is when you submit for a stage one, they introduce you to a third party assessor that you can talk to directly. I even like been able to kind of like, I was always pushing to have calls with them, get to know them, make some connections, understand their approach. And the part I really like is that that assessor comes on site after the construction is completed and go through the checklist to make sure that you have done all of those things. This is a huge difference with LEED that I would say Green Globes is somehow easier and flexible by not having those prerequisites, but because LEED is more design intent. So if you show something in the drawing in during the design, and like for example for energy, and you end up like installing a chiller with a much lower efficiency, you don't need to necessarily revise that by LEED. For LEED, I mean, we oftentimes suggest to do that to kind of uh, be more morally kind of like responsible for the project. But uh, longest story short, in many cases, like when the credit get awarded in LEED during the design, it's the construction changes is not easily get tracked. But for green globes, that part is pretty important. So because assessor comes on site and check the efficiency level of your chillers. I will go through uh, the the pedals or the concept pretty quick. As I said, the management part has a little bit more elements than uh, LEED, like the integrative process, project management, best practices. Commissioning is actually here rather than energy in LEED. Site, I would say it's is the one that is pretty similar to what you have in sustainable site in LEED. And in general, the only difference is instead of having one big credit in LEED, we have a long list of checklists and items to go through, and you simply check the box when you're compliant or not. Energy is also pretty similar to LEED. We just have more paths to get points in green globes. We have energy star pass. Uh, we have the prescriptive pass like LEED, but is a slightly more flexible. And similar to LEED, we have the reduced demands and demand program renewable energy. The one that I really like in energy's tab is other than, for example, if you have LED lights or if you have efficient systems, other than getting points in the whole through the whole building energy simulation, you also get individual points by showing more efficiency in each part. That's a big difference with LEED. Uh, so yeah, these are the 4 paths that we only have 2 in LEED. I mean, and the funny part is like Green Globes had that pass with the carbon emission before LEED version 4.1 had it. Water is pretty much similar to LEED. It has a water calculator similar to what we have in LEED as indoor water use calculator. The part I like about Green Globes here is they have their calculator also includes like dishwashers, clothes washers, and those stuff as well, in addition to the typical fixtures. Material and resources is also pretty much similar. It's more comprehensive. I try to be more kind of taking in advantage of green globes, but at the end I will get to the point that why sometimes we are favoring LEED as well. But what I like is if you have worked with LEED, there is a credit for pursuing environmental product declaration, which is simply you show 220 products in your projects with EPD, and then you get the point. Green globes is more reasonable. You just say that what percentage of your materials in the project has EPD. I mean, LEED also has 2 paths on showing how you're doing with your materials, but there is an easy path in LEED that we don't have it here. So simply to show that the embodied carbon of your materials in the projects have been kind of like a studied, and they have that certification called the EPD. Green Globes is taking a holistic approach of like pushing you to tell them the overall percentage. Emission is also pretty much similar to what we have under IQ, a couple of IQ credits under LEED. Indoor environment is also like similar to LEED. It has thermal comfort, acoustic comfort, lighting, and source control of indoor pollutions, like taking care of VOCs and floor score for your flooring materials, make sure your ventilation system is kind of compliant. The big difference is that the ventilation system is not a prerequisite here. So whatever you do for your ventilation, Green Globe doesn't care. Like if you even say I'm not compliant with any system, there's nothing you hold you back, which is the unfortunate part of Green Globes to me. But the daylight process is also different because it's works with daylight factor, which came from the BREEAM in England and is different from LEED.
And actually, let me jump in on that ventilation thing, because this has come up for us on a couple of projects where the client wanted to pursue Green Globes because it was the only option under the Chicago Sustainable Development Policy that didn't require them to install direct kitchen exhaust to the outdoors. So it didn't trigger that ASHRAE standard. But I do want to mention that that Green Globes does have a MultiFamily program, and you are required to go through that if you're going to be using the Green Globes certification for Fannie Mae points. There's a green discounts on those rates. And that does require, I think it's ASHRAE 62.1 2010 or a local code equivalent. So while it's true there's no prerequisites in Green Globes, that MultiFamily does trigger some additional like energy, water, and ventilation kind of it adds some prerequisites basically. So something to watch out for if you're working on a affordable housing project, which is something we're applying Green Globes to on a few projects right now, and just adds that on.
And like, so what I had, I would just like mention a couple of things, and Emily, I'd like to hear more about that because it's, I think that is interesting. That
let me actually drop the link to it in the.
I didn't do any Green Globes for MultiFamily, and the question came up a couple of times that do we want to go with the new construction framework or MultiFamily? And
they're otherwise totally identical. Adding the MultiFamily framework doesn't change any of the credits in the rating system. It just changes that you do need to have a minimum ventilation and energy performance.
Great. And this is, I just like added this project. We've just been talking about that. It's a project that this been the first Green Globes project that I did. Is actually it's been achieving 2 globes, and we actually also did commissioning and enhanced commissioning for the job, and the process has been really integrative. And before these are the talking points simply that I had and the highlights for the discussion. And Emily, do you want to talk more about the Chicago Sustainable Development Policy, because that's been the main driver in Chicago to kind of push projects to achieve Green Globes?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in 2017, Chicago rolled out an update to its Sustainable Development Policy. Previously, it had required 50% green roof and LEED certification on all new construction over a certain size or meeting certain zoning conditions. But that was really prescriptive and didn't fit every project well. So they basically made a bigger menu of options, and that added in green globes as an alternative to LEED. And it was like green globes, LEED, enterprise green communities, which is an affordable housing standard, and Energy Star also as an option. So we've definitely, that really, I think, set off a wave of Green Globes projects certifying in Chicago, just for the reason I mentioned earlier about the kitchen ventilation. You know, that's one big expense that LEED would add on top of just city code in Chicago. And so
did we lose her? Emily, can you hear us? Yeah, so yeah, the Chicago Sustainable Development Policy, I can also share the link to that, but there are several paths to it, as she was explaining, that you can choose LEED, WELL, Passive House, or any other certification to achieve the number of points that you need for that. But yeah, I think we have, I mean, I hope she can join again. But yeah, we can open up to the conversation. And sorry if this part took longer than I thought. I mean, it's we always try to make it short, but it's so what you guys see in St. Louis or other areas that you're located, have you seen Green Gloves project happening or a demand for it compared to LEED?
I haven't really. I don't know. I don't work directly in the green building industry. So I'm not sure if we have any local projects going on.
Yeah, I feel like there was that 100 Kings Highway building, that we call the pineapple building.
The upside down pineapple.
The upside down pineapple in St. Louis, and there was some discussion about that building, doing green globes, but it's not very widely, I would say, adopted in St. Louis, green globes. So that's why we kind of wanted to have a conversation today about that, and during our whole coffee break series of different certifications. So I think another question that I would just throw out to you, Mohammed, is why should a project specifically choose like this, Green Globes, over another?
I think that, I mean, in general, my approach recently been not to start with the certification and start with the process of like doing some assessment for the client to tell them which certification they should pursue. Green Globes is a really good case when there is a barrier with one of those prerequisites, mainly ventilation, as Emily mentioned, or energy, or like any other prerequisite that the project cannot do, but still they want to achieve a label. There are a couple of disadvantages that Green Globes doesn't really give a big advantage over like integrative design or just like go above and beyond. So it simply is an easier certification to achieve, but there's still, there are so many opportunities. If they achieve that, there are so many opportunities for like reduced APR for loans. There are some frameworks nationally that if you achieve Green Globe certification, you can apply for certain funds and grants and loans. That's one reason. And I think in general, it's a good substitution for LEED when LEED is not available for different reasons, or the project don't have the budget, or they want to go for something slightly easier or more affordable. I would say Green Globes is a good option. It's I just remember that I had a project in Seattle also a while ago, but in general, Green Globes wasn't that successful as they thought it would be. So it's it meant to compete with LEED, and it was backed by a couple of organizations, but I think LEED is still thriving, and in general, since you have had conversation on WELL and others, in general, since WELL and maybe other certification been growing, in general, this competition between LEED and Green Globes were not that successful. I mean, so in general, like WELL is also taking some market from Green Globes and in LEED in general as well.
So what is the general like cost difference in the certifications between LEED and Green Globes, or you can just speak to Green Globes alone?
I mean, I can answer, and I think Emily, I'm sure, has an input on that too. Like it's really tough. It's really tough to say the cost, but for that specific reason that Emily mentioned, that especially in Chicago, because the local code doesn't require have a direct exhaust for the kitchen, if you go with Green Globes, you'd save a ton of money with not needing to meet that prerequisite. And in general, I would say that the premium cost for Green Globes is a slightly lower. I would usually say close to 0 for 1 globe and maybe 1 to 2% for 2 globes. But Emily, what's your thought on that?
That sounds about right to me. And then in terms of certification fees, they're comparable. Like Green Globes is, I think it comes out slightly higher for some projects and slightly lower for others. So yeah, nothing huge there. I mean, I really think the 1 through 4 globes it's pretty comparable to certified through platinum for LEED. But those prerequisites, like you might say a LEED silver building has that extra cost premium, so you have to hit those prerequisites. But if you're able to find a path to 2 globes, maybe without those ventilation points, or without I know another one that has pushed a project to Green Globes is that smoking prerequisite, like in a multifamily condo buildings, or maybe the owner's a little scared off by having to put this like legal requirement in, in a unit that someone's going to own. So yeah, those are really like the ventilation and the smoking are the prerequisites that have actually tripped folks up. But at this point, I think, LEED version 4, the prerequisites are, if you're doing best practices already, or, following current local codes, you're in good shape. But yeah,
I have a couple of questions. First of all, thanks for bringing this information. Question number 1 is, do you have to have the professional filling it out like in LEED? Do you have to be an accredited or trained professional to go to the globe, Green Globe?
No, I think there isn't even a credit for it like there is in LEED.
There's like GGP and like
apply for it.
Yeah,
right. The credentials exist. Yeah, it doesn't really come into the certification process though.
Yeah, I'm lead AP, but I don't have that GGP, but like I've been doing it. So it's not even like lead AP that if you have it, you're gonna get 1 more point. Even if you get that, GGP is not gonna add any point, and like even before that, it's not required to have that.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, a lot of the things that I'm hearing about the differences have to do with what one of the big things we keep coming back to is ventilation. And, with issues surrounding health and what have you, I mean, that's part of the thing with LEED, is it's not just the efficiency, it's also the health benefit. So I get that it's a certification you can pursue if your locality doesn't require that ventilation. But is this something, do you think, that may end up pushing LEED to change some of its requirements? So like if it's not required locally, that they wouldn't, and then conversely, okay, so you get this green globe and you didn't do your ventilation, isn't there some downside to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at that Chicago Sustainable Development Policy, and I'm like, there's exactly one option if you don't want to pay for that ventilation, and I wish you would choose any of the other options. But you know, it comes down to the client's decision, of course, and if that's their choice.
Oh, I think we lost her again. Yeah, so I can can continue.
I thought it was me. Can you expound?
Can you hear me?
What did you have a? Yes, I can hear you. Did you have a thought on that as well, Mohammad?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, yeah, I simply wanted to continue what Emily was saying, that it's definitely a downside, because having minimum ventilation, especially in residential projects, is a requirement. And when you do green globes, you have that risk of not providing proper ventilation for projects. I mean, simply the building that I live in doesn't have ventilation or direct exhaust. So my windows are open all the time, and I have air quality monitor to make sure I'm good. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Green globes is imposing some risk on, are imposing some risk in like not having ventilation. In general, when you look into the certification, it has similar elements advocating for health and wellness, like daylight circuit. I mean, just like healthy materials, proper filtration, but still that ventilation is imposing some danger. But it's even in the project that I worked with, through the process, I advocated for inclusion of that ventilation. So in one project, even though they started pursuing green globes to not meet that precondition for ventilation, but through the project, I've been able to show the importance of proper ventilation and the direct exhaust in the kitchen, and the client ended up adding that. So we can always even, it's not that green globes is advocating against having that, it's just a matter of like not having any prerequisite.
Mohammad, do you ever feel like when you're going through a certification process, maybe you have a client that is interested in green globes, but would you ever steer them to say LEED instead, or another certification? Because it seems as though that they're some of the meetings or discussions that you have are geared towards a different certification.
Yeah, definitely. And I especially recently, I would say in the last year, my approach was when a client reach out to us saying that I want LEED certification for this building, we say no. Let's just start with the minimal scope of work. Let's hire us for just maybe hourly work, or just like not a specific scope, and let us help you identify which certification is best for you. I mean, our older strategy used to be clients reaching out to us saying that I need WELL, I need LBC, I need green globes. But now we are going against that, saying that let's compare them. Let's see what's your need. I mean, I've done WELL, I'm a WELL faculty. We have done LBC for University of Chicago. But even when a client reach out these days for WELL, we say that let's do a feasibility assessment to see what is your need. Do you want to just, and even a lot of times we end up saying that let's mix and match. Let's do WELL and LEED, or let's do like let's do LBC plus another component of like a certification like reset. So this is a new approach that I really like, because you can you just go one step back from like choosing the certification, do a feasibility assessment of like figuring out what is their exact need and priority. If it's a project located in an area with water issues, or like with air quality issues, or it's like a senior housing, so health and wellness is more important, that helps to kind of choose the right one.
Perfect. That I think that was a textbook answer. So thank you so much today for presenting. I did want to just pull everybody's attention to our next coffee break that Freddie put in the chat. It is going to be on GPRO, Operations and Maintenance. So I would encourage everybody to attend that one to learn a little bit about that certification and that process. Just to bring everybody also to attention to our next program, we have an evening program next week, which is a lead tour of Washington University in St. Louis. That should be super exciting to be able to see that. That is on Tuesday from 5:30 to 7, on July 13th.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mohammed. And thanks for bringing Emily along too. That was great. I'll send you guys the recording. Maybe you could pass it around to your team as well. This has been really fun and I'd love to keep in contact.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was thinking to show up for that tour. I mean, I haven't been to St. Louis for a couple
you should
of
definitely
years.
come. Yeah, and it'll be virtually. So,
Oh, okay.
So yes,
That's easier then.
Please join us. Yeah, that would be great. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the weekend. Take care.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Bye.
Bye.